Welcome to the BJCP Tasting Exam Prep Course from the Brewers Anonymous Homebrew Club. This is Section 3, Learning BJCP Beer Styles. Now, what's actually going to take place in this section is that we're going to give you some tools on how to learn these styles. This is one of those sections in this course that pretty much everything's going to shift to you to take care of offline. We're going to give you the tools in these lessons. We're going to talk about how to use them, some best tips, some things that are important to know when you're studying these styles, but the actual studying of styles really comes down to you. This is on you. The more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. We can only give you the tools in this section. It's kind of a limitation of these virtual classes, but we're doing our best to give you everything you need to go in and get the best score possible. So let's get started. This is lesson 1. This is the BJCP beer style commercial examples, although we do have a little bit of preface before that on the guidelines themselves. So let's get started. Here's our usual disclaimer. This episode in this series is not affiliated with, nor endorsed or checked by the BJCP, the AHA, or any other organization discussed in any episode of this series. Lesson 1, BJCP beer style commercial examples. So building up to that, we're going to start by taking a look at the BJCP beer style guidelines. Then we're going to take a look at the commercial examples and how we can use that information to help us prepare for our exam. And then we're going to download the score sheets and practice. And we're going to talk about why that is something you absolutely need to do in preparing for this exam. So let's get started. The BJCP beer style guidelines. We're not going to talk too much about the guidelines themselves. If you're at this point on your PET certification, you should already be very familiar with them by now. If, however, you got this far and don't know the guidelines, check out Section 5 of our course, the BJCP Training Program Entrance Exam Prep at learn.brewersanonymous.org. That section is an extensive look at the guidelines. What we will talk about in this lesson is where to find them. And the easiest place to find them is at this link right here, bjcp.org/bjcp-style-guidelines. Not the easiest URL to remember, but I will put this link in the lesson description. We also have another way you can get the guidelines themselves in this lesson, which we'll talk about at the very end. But there's some other things about this link I want you to be aware of. So once you get to this site, get the PDF file because you're going to need that. In fact, while you're on that page, scroll down a bit and check out the links for the iPhone and Android apps and get the appropriate one for your device because you'll need that as well. Not only for this course, but also for future competition judging. Now that you have the PDF and the appropriate app for your device, set aside some time very soon after getting those and read through all of categories 1 through 26. Remember, we're only going to judge beers that fall in categories 1 through 26. There's several more after that, but we don't need to know those or prepare for those for our exam. Now, you may think you already know all these beer styles, so take the time to find out and make sure. And as you read through, make notes of styles that seem completely new to you or that you're not as familiar with as you thought, so you can review them again and again until you are familiar with them. Now, once you've read through them at least once, take another look at a section under each substyle in the guidelines that you might not have necessarily paid attention to while judging, and that's the commercial examples section. Under each substyle in each category of the BJCP beer style guidelines, there is a small list of commercial examples of that style. These aren't necessarily perfect 50-point beers, but they're very close and very high-scoring beers, and they represent the style of that beer very well. This entry is saying that these are beers that are exemplary examples of each of those styles. Here's the commercial example section for category 18B American Pale Ale, for example. We have Deschutes Mirror Pond Pale Ale, Half Acre Daisy Cutter Pale Ale, Great Lakes Burning River, La Cumbre Acclimated, APA, I think I said that right, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and Stone Pale Ale 2.0. Use this list to help you prepare for your exam by going out and getting a commercial example for each of the styles that you don't know well at the very least. Getting at least one example will give you a sensory memory of that style that you can refer to from experience when you're judging that beer style in a tasting exam. Now, with all that, there's a very hard truth. You're not going to find some of these commercial examples. The first thing that comes to mind is most of the Czech lagers as an example. But we have tools to help overcome that in upcoming sections of this course, so if you can't find some, there's no reason to panic. We will get through this. So now that you have a copy of the guidelines, From this moment on until your judging exam, you should be judging every single beer you have to its declared style. You might think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. If you're taking this exam course, you're presumably preparing to take the tasting exam, and part of that preparation is to get into a beer judging state of mind, so it's not something you have to figure out how to do the moment you sit down for that exam and the timer starts. There's two basic ways that I approached this when I was going through my exam. And it always started with having a beer in front of me. And the first and best way in terms of preparing for the exam is to write out a score sheet. You're going to need to practice and retrain your hand to write 6 full and complete score sheets, and there's no time like the present to start. If you're not able to do that, I get it. You're in a tap room, you're with some friends, you don't have a pencil, you certainly don't have a piece of paper, and you don't want to type on your phone while you're trying to enjoy the beer. At the very least, take a little time for each beer to mentally compare the style. You'll likely have your phone with you. Open the app, get familiar with the style. If you already know the style, even better, just make mental notes that you're staying in that judging frame of mind, and you're ready, you're primed, good to go come the tasting exam time. Over the next few months, leading into your exam, the best thing you can do to prepare is practice, practice, practice. We've already discussed the importance of filling out the score sheets completely, and practicing will make that easier each time you do it. So our mantra from here on out in this course is going to be practice, practice, practice. Now, before we wrap up this lesson, I've included some useful downloads, and I'll show you where to find those in just a second. These downloads are the PDF version of the BJCP beer style guidelines. There's also a copy of the standard beer score sheet and the examinee score sheet. Please do yourself the huge favor of using these score sheets. I can't understate how physically difficult writing this much can be if you don't do this amount of writing on the regular. If you already write a lot by hand, great, you're ahead of the game. But if you don't, you need to practice. Hand cramps are a really big obstacle in this tasting exam, and I want to avoid them best we can before we sit for our exam. So to find those files, it's really easy. Below this video you're watching right now, if you're in the LMS system, if you're not in the LMS system, you're watching this on YouTube, go to learn.brewersanonymous.org and find the same course so you can find these sheets. Right underneath this video, there's an overview and an exercise files tab. The overview one is always active by default. Just click on the exercise files tab, and there you go. There are the downloads I just mentioned. And get those score sheets and get ready to write, because no joke how difficult they can be when you're not ready physically. All right, that does it for the end of lesson 1. We have one more lesson to cover in preparing to learn our beer style. So let's head on over to lesson 2.